welcome to our talk, Life Hacking Cloud Architectures. As you can see, I'm only one person here. Unfortunately, Mirna got sick during the recent days, so I will try to cover her parts here. Well, of course, I'm not as sympathetic as she is, but maybe you're giving me a try. Can you hear me in the above lines here? Can you hear me well? Yes, that's okay. Okay, so Mirna and I, we are cloud consultants or cloud architects, and usually we are supporting our customers by enabling their teams, forming some platforms for old as new workloads, old and new workloads as well. That's a better description. So what we often observe is if you write new software or integrating some tools, you often create some security vulnerabilities, and putting as much security tooling into a platform is something we really strongly recommend. And in this talk, we are going to have a look on a architecture which is not totally made up. It's more like a best of the things we saw in our projects. There's one thing which is totally fictional. That's the company, which is called Never Victim Consult. That's a consulting agency which claims to save you for cryptocurrency robbery, right? So the idea is that they have technologies in place that observe your cryptocurrency things and your millions of euros. And what they did is they moved their application landscape to a cloud. And they have been so proud of that they even published a blog post. That blog post and that cloud migration has been done by this team. So they share their responsibilities. They even have, I think, a head of DevOps. Yeah, they have automation and a security engineer as well. So the idea is now that we have a closer look on Never Victim Consult. What we know is their domain, and a very good starting point to get some information about a company is to look at their domain. So we are going to do a DNS enumeration on Never Victim. And by doing so, we already recognize they're using Google Cloud DNS. So that's nice to know. We don't know if they're using Google Cloud at all, but at least for their public domain, they're using Google Cloud DNS. Well, what is good to know is also a downside for us. Google Cloud DNS prevents you from a DNS zone transfer. A DNS zone transfer would immediately give many details about the DNS zone. We would see subdomains and many more information. Well, unfortunately, we cannot see that here. But there are more options to do so. What we can do is a brute force attack on that DNS zone. Therefore, we're using DNS reconnaissance tool in the brute force mode on the same domain. Maybe I should have not used that long name here. And we're speeding things a bit up with 25 threads in parallel. And we are using, I missed a -d here. And we're using a dictionary. A dictionary is a kind of word list. Yeah? So we are using a word list with with 5,000 of the mostly used subdomains, and during its runtime, this tool is asking the DNS server, well, is there a subdomain named test, or a subdomain called def, or whatever? And it found some things, right? So we're just collecting information about Never Victim Consult. We found out that they may be using Outlook or Office 365. They do have a mail server, but what definitely caught my attention is test. It looks like as if they had a test stage. That's interesting. So I would really like to dive a bit deeper and do the same brute force attack on test.never victim consult. And I'm hoping for getting some more information. And that's typical how an attacker would find some information about your company or about the domains you own. And there are 20 records found. There's a Git server on test. There's something called social. No idea what that is. There's a Nexus and there's a Jenkins. Well, Jenkins is really good to know. Jenkins, hands up, who doesn't know Jenkins? Everyone knows Jenkins. Well, okay. So it is very interesting for me to find more about this Jenkins instance. There's a tool set, Metasploit, which comes with many penetration testing tools, and some of them will help me to find out some details about this Jenkins instance. Hands up, who knows Metasploit? Okay, one hand is working. That's good to know. So we are using a scanner for HTTP-based applications. Well, Jenkins is HTTP-based. And we are still in our enumeration phase. Enumeration means I'm collecting information about my target. And this extension for Metasploit has some options. So I need to set the remote host. And maybe that's the other options here look quite okay. So let's see what we are going to find out about Jenkins here. We see that Jenkins is listening on port 80 in a pretty much current version. That's not good for us because current versions don't have much exploits which are known yet. So this will be a bit more hard to find access to. We could give it also a try. We could use search. We can find out if there are any known exploits in my Metasploit database which can handle this Jenkins or giving me some access to. And unfortunately, nothing on the current version. Well, I could give it a try to use one of these exploits, but it will take some luck and some time. What I would really like to demonstrate here is a brute force attack on Jenkins login. So I'm trying to log in to Jenkins with a user name and password combination. So I'm also using Metasploit, therefore. Scanner. The login module, which is a bit more complex. We also need to set our hosts again to port 80 worked pretty well, so we are using port 80 again. And one thing I need to mention here is there are some login modules available for Jenkins. The default installation comes with the Spring Security module. So I'm guessing here for the Spring Security module. If that would be a more sophisticated Jenkins administrator, you would find something like the Ping Access module, something which is a bit more interesting for securing access. So we are going to use login URL with Spring Security check. Yep. And so I think we are all set. There's still two things missing. What do you need in order to log in. You need username and password. That are two things we just don't have. So what we can do is use a word list again. There's a pretty well-known word list, which is the RockU list. It consists of 32 million leaked passwords and is public available on GitHub. So using a brute force attack for 32 million passwords would take some time. So I'm doing a small subset for that. I prepared that for you. Yeah. There it is. So I created a password list. So let's set pass file to the password list. And there's still something missing. I need some usernames. I don't know anything about the users of this Jenkins instance, but I know something. Any ideas? Admin. Admin would be nice. Yeah, that would be easy. I know something more. Do you remember that blog post? So I know some names from the company. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a username list generator. So we have these are the persons, the people who are working in the DevOps team, and I think they might have access to Jenkins. So I'm going to use a generator the user list creator in order to create usernames based on typical patterns. I'll show you what I mean. Output. So it generated me just some usernames based on typical patterns. So I'm going to use that one. Okay, let's see if we are all set. Exploit. So now Metasploit is trying to get access. It is using the passwords from the RockU list. I remind you of the 32 millions. And I created a subset which is not with the most sophisticated passwords, but as you can see, it's not admin, right? So it's trying the combinations of the generated usernames, which I just found on the blog post. And I just recognized as I forget one option. So usually I would set stop on success. So we need to have attention on the green mark. Let's see if there's one combination that works out. In the meantime, do you have any questions for that? It's very silent in here. So, one question. Yes. Yes, it would block a brute force. It would do a exclusion on my IP, for example. But that's something you would need to configure. So the default installation does not do that for you. So you can bring such technologies in place. But as you can see, this Jenkins does not block me anything. There was a green one. That's good to hear. Then let's see if we can find that one again. There it is. Mr. Jeffrey van der Linden has this username and a password. So I would say let's try to use Jeffrey's login. to log into Jenkins. So it's Jenkins address again. And our username looks like this. I need to paste that into my VM. Of course, it's scrolled up again. There it is. And there's a working password. The hardest thing in this talk is to memorize which combination does work on the Linux VM and which does work on the Mac OS. That's okay. So we have a working Jenkins login, and what we can see here, there's some jobs running, some jobs ran some minutes ago, and there's this maybe that social subdomain which you just discovered, and there's a deploy job, and one thing caught my attention here, which is the infrastructure. This may be a infrastructure as code deployment job. Who is using infrastructure as code? Many hands here. How do you authenticate against your cloud provider? What do you need for that? Say again, please. Tokens, that would be nice. What? Some keys, yeah, right. You need a service account, for example. So it looks like that Never Victim Consult is using a cloud provider, and the credentials maybe they are stored in Jenkins. And what you can recognize here, Never Victim Consult also has a hard time with Jenkins plugin maintenance, right? So we're not alone. So manage credentials. Let's see what credentials are stored here. Some Kubernetes config, so they're using Kubernetes, which is interesting for us. And GCP test. GCP means Google Cloud Platform. And a service account for a staging test. So I really would like to have these credentials. Unfortunately, I cannot see them here, right? That's a problem. But as you can guess, I wouldn't show you that if I would not provide a little trick here. There's a little trick. You can do inspectation here. And then you have, again, a hard time to write this one. This is a string which is encrypted by a Jenkins managed key. So I cannot decrypt this string without more sophisticated tools. But I have another idea. I could ask Jenkins to decrypt this key for me. That would be really nice. So let's see if that will work. And I would like to mention again that this is not made up. So there's a script console in Jenkins. And you can ask Jenkins to decrypt a key which is encrypted with its decrypt a string which is encrypted with its key. So print line Hudson util secret Okay, so let's see if I typed everything correctly. And there's a result. Is that something that you reminds of anything? Any idea what this could be? No ideas. A JWT. How do you recognize a JWT from that? From E and Y. Yeah. Yeah. I think well, you're right. Not at all, but the J in your JWT is correct. How do you store secrets usually in Kubernetes or somewhere else? You do a base 64 encoding. So this looks like a base 64 encoded string. And well, that's not a hard one. We could try to decode it. Let's do a working directory. No autocomplete means I need to go to bash. I call it cloud access. It's encoded. It's probably encoded JSON. Let's assume that. Okay, so we will try to decode that one. So let's jump back to the console where it's a bit better, a bit easier to read, which does not react anymore. No, it's so how do we encode that? Cat into it's probably we need to pipe that. And that's a GCP service account, probably. You ready to see? It is. So I won't show you that for very long because there are valid credentials, which are going to be destroyed after this talk has been ended, so the recording won't help you much. Okay, so we have a probably working. I would say it is working. Let's give it a try to use that JSON to authenticate against Google Cloud. And as most of you are using infrastructure as code, you know that this is also not totally made up, right? So gcloud authentication, and we need to activate a service account from a key file, which is GCP service account JSON. And yes, now it's Google Cloud specific. And the thing is, it's a bit different for Azure or for AWS, but it's all the same flow. So we are now using Google Cloud init console only. And yes, we want to reinitialize, and hopefully we have network connection. And we see we do have access to a compute service account and to a Jenkins on test. So as we are interested in getting access to what Jenkins also has access, we're using the Jenkins service account, right? This is the account which is Jenkins using while it's creating the infrastructure as code part. Okay, so we successfully authenticated here. Let's have a look on time, which is okay. So let's see what we have there. We could have a look on storage buckets, which are, well, it would be S3 in AWS. Storage. What did I type wrong? Okay, no storage buckets so far. But what we maybe also have is a container cluster. So we saw there is a kube config thing, so maybe they are using Kubernetes. And we can see there are 2 Kubernetes clusters available in this service account. I tested in a prod cluster, which is great, I would say. Shall we try to log into this cluster? We could use gcloud container clusters get credentials. No autocomplete again. But I have an idea. There it is. So, and we have a running and working kubeconfig. What would you do with a working kubeconfig? Any ideas? Which gives me the chance to drink something. Say again, please. Yeah. More secrets to read. Right, that would be cool, right? I think we can do a bit exploration here. So let's use Octant to explore a bit what's what's available in this cluster. Do you know Octant? Well, still localhost. So Octant helps us to browse across a cluster with a bit of visualization. So what we can see here, make it a bit bigger. We do have some namespaces. We do have a CRM. CRM would be nice, right? There are customer data. That's interesting to know and maybe interesting to exfiltrate, right? But we're still in the enumeration phase. We do have access and browse a bit around what's out there. There's a key cloak. There's a tool chain. What's in the tool chain? Oh, there's our friend Jenkins. We already know him. And there's that conduit. Well, the name conduit, I read it quite often, so that must be a thing. They are running pods, which are looking like Spring-based applications. And I could start a terminal within that container, and I'm root within that container. So that's working like a charm currently. So what can I do? I still don't know much about that company or what this application is doing. So I want to learn a bit more. And what I need to do, well, how to explain that? All I have is time. So I would like to analyze a bit deeper. So I'm going to deploy a sidecar container which captures all traffic and send it to my VM, which enables me to analyze the traffic on Sunday evening, for example. I can do that. You know what a sidecar container is? Hands up if you don't know. That was quick. Hands up. Okay. So we are going to edit the deployment of Conduit backend. We can see the name here, right? And that's time for VI when I get really nervous. So I prepared something. There are some small lines which are quite powerful. This is a container, a TCP proxy, which will capture all TCP traffic and send it to my VM. And I will paste that into that deployment. At least no error message. And what we can now observe, maybe I should switch to I think there is a light team, but So it is recreating, and we now have two containers running inside that. And well, now my sidecar is running and sending the traffic. And now you need to imagine a break from several months. Yeah. So let's have a quick recap here. And if you have any question, please interrupt me and ask a question. We still have some time. So we see that I was a bit lucky to find that key into Jenkins. But please remember, that was maybe lucky at all, but there are way more ways to attack. There are exploits available for not that new Jenkins versions. There are many ways to get access to something which is interesting, and then I'm doing, I'm looking around and trying to find more interesting data. So what I did is I analyzed the DNS, got to Jenkins, and then I'm exfiltrating data. What I also could do, if I would remember the correct command, I would maybe find a database backup and download it here. Maybe I will do that later on. So would your project or your customer or your employer, would you be able to handle that attack? Any idea how to mitigate that problem? That was I'm not good hearing it down here. So IP tables. Fail to ban, that would be an idea, right? Yeah. But what I'm very good in is automation. So fail to ban would just slow down things. Any other ideas? Firewalls would be also an idea. Yep. You should not expose your Jenkins. that would be a really good idea. Yeah. So we caught some attention. I caught some attention with my attack here. The egress costs have been increased. So because I'm sending all the traffic to my VM, so egress cost increased. That's what Never Victim Consult observed. And somehow they have some downtimes. Well, because each time they're doing a redeploy, I need to bring my sidecar container again, and I'm trying to do that in a way that they don't observe that, so they observing some strange behavior. So and they decided to have some action items. They forced the employees to change their passwords. It's a good idea, right? Hopefully they don't use passwords from the record list. And they're logging all ingress traffic. Logging all the ingress traffic is a very strong solution, because you could send it to a security observability system and say, well, if there's something going on, at least alert me, please. And they got some consulting from Novatech for their cloud security, right? And then they came up with the idea Tetragon. Tetragon is a very modern and a very strong tool in order to place some tracing policies. This is one policy. You would maybe have a tons or 100 of policies here. This policy is working on the kernel level, and it will trigger a signal kill if something on HA proxy happens. So why is HA proxy interesting here? Any ideas? Why I'm looking at HA proxy? The idea is HA proxy is usually not very often modified. So I'm placing policies which getting my attention. So on what I would do next up is I would do the very same on prod. So I observed Never Victim Consult. I know what's conduit app and I know how to exfiltrate data there, but what I want to do is doing the same on prod, right? And well, that's easy. Yeah, we had a rehearsal on test. Now we just need to change some parameters here. We're switching to prod, and Octant is doing automatically. we are having one container. So my sidecar container is not available here. So I'm going to edit the deployment again. And I'm lucky again, so my sidecar container is going to be deployed. But there's something immediately going on here. You can see a problem. And this problem just happened when I added the deployment. Any idea what is happening? And what's not so good in this situation for me as an attacker? What's the problem for me with the crash loop back off? Sorry? Right. Yes. They are going to notice. Anywhere in time, they're going to notice something is not going on properly. And that's because I'm having a look on what's the problem here. Why do we have that situation? And I can see my sidecar container is just not working. And I recognize there is something in place which I cannot, which prevents me from deploying my container here. So no luck for the attacker. And that was quite cheap, right? I just the Never Victim consult just used Tetragon, and Tetragon kills my container each time it's trying to modify anything. And yes, that's just one policy. There are many default policies available out there, and that's just one idea what you can do. At least you need tools in place that notifies you, that enables you to observe what's going on in your architecture. You saw I'm using low latency, low technology DNS tooling. I'm using modern tooling like Kubernetes. So you need to observe all your architecture items. That will not save you, but it will make it life a bit easier for you. And with that, I'm open to questions. And if you want to send Mirna some get well soon wishes on Twitter, I think she will be happy about that. Any questions so far? So you mean if I'm root inside the backend container, so I could place something inside the container on root level. Yeah. This policy would not prevent that, but I can deploy other policies that could prevent that. And what would be a really low hanging fruit policy here? Preventing root shells. It's just not okay that a process is running as root even inside the container. You don't need Tetragon for preventing root shells. That's something you can do with the Open Policy Agent, for example. So that's the most easy option here. More questions? Yes, please. Yes, that's the first time this talk I'm providing the consultancy answer. It depends a bit, right? It depends on how you configure Tetragon and how you configure a Kubernetes cluster. This Kubernetes cluster obviously has no role-based access control in place, which is kind of default in many projects that we see. Fortunately, some cloud providers enabled RBAC on default, but in this particular case, I would be able to delete the tetragon policy as an attacker, and then nothing would happen. I would be successful in the end. If I'm doing a bit dive deeper and installing tetragon a bit more professional, I can prevent that, what you're saying. I could prevent modifying tetragon policies as it is running on kernel level. More questions? Yes, sir. Yeah, it would definitely be a good idea to not use the Jenkins user database, but providing two-factor authentication, other login modules, and login modules for Google Cloud. So you could also use, you could disable logging in via service account. You could disable login without two factors in Google Cloud, but that are things that you need to enable, right? It's not enabled by default, so it would help, but there are ways to intercept two-factor authentication as well, but that is something I can handle, but I know that there are people out there that can handle that. Yes, sir. Okay, so why does my trick with inspection work out? I'm not able to answer this question. Maybe you can ask this question on GitHub. Yeah. Your second question was? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. There are several ways. You could. Well, it depends if you're using the credentials plugin from Jenkins. There are exploits available for the credentials plugin. Just use searchsploit and you will find exploits that will get you access to that credentials plugin as well. But it would be better to store credentials not in Jenkins but in a vault, a HashiCorp vault, for example, right? You can do many mistakes by doing so, but if you're doing it seriously, it would be way better to store it in a proper place, not in a default Jenkins configuration. Yes, please. Yeah, that's true. Yes, it's also not okay that this Jenkins instance is like an admin party, so everybody has the access to the script console. You could also do RBAC on Jenkins as well, but these are the configurations that we quite often see and well, that's why I'm using that here. You need to take Jenkins administration seriously. Further questions? No. One more. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Two people deployments, for example. So that are it's often not known with this term, but it's something like security controls. Implement more security controls, more handles that prevents you for having access on an easy way. Yes, that's true. That would be much more better in this case. You're right. Okay, so if you're interested, feel free to reach out to Mirna and myself. We are open to questions and feedback. With that, have a nice conference.